What I want to talk about today is I have run into a rhetoric, I guess, surrounding self-love that's really pissing me off, to put it nicely. There's this idea that in order to have some level of self-esteem, there has to be some corresponding proficiency. And that's that's way more technical than I wanted to say this. But basically, people go, if you have a thought in your head and you're like, I'm ugly, I'm stupid, I'm not good at my job, I'm not good at what I'm doing, I'm unlikable to the people around me, I'm not funny enough. Any sort of self-esteem consideration. The counterpoint that people immediately jump to, or they go a couple of different directions. The first one is they just directly push back the other way. So they have the thought, I'm not pretty, and they go, nope, I am pretty, I'm wrong, I am beautiful. All right? So that's the first thing that people do. The other one is they sort of divert, right? So they'll go, I'm not pretty. Again, to use an example, I'm not pretty, but I am funny. Or I'm not pretty or funny, but I'm good at sports. Or I'm not any of those things, but I have a really good connection with my family. Whatever, right? They try to sort of mix and match. They're like, I'm not good at this thing, but I am really good at this thing, so it's okay, right? And then there's other ways people go, but those are the two big ones. And I find a couple of problems with each of them. The first one, to go directly opposite to what you're thinking self-esteem-wise. If you say, I'm not pretty, no wait, I am. The insinuation there, which you will notice subconsciously or maybe consciously, is that you're not allowed to be happy with yourself if you're not beautiful, right? If you say, I'm not happy with myself because I'm not beautiful, and your counterpoint to that internally is, no, I am beautiful, then you're not saying, I have intrinsic self-worth. You're saying, my self-worth is defined by my beauty, which I have, so it's okay. That's a horribly, that's a terrible way of looking at it. Your self-worth is not given to you by your self-proficiency in any particular area. You're not a valuable human being because you're beautiful. And what does that say about everybody who's not? Because I'm not somebody who's going to sit here and say, you're all beautiful in your own way, we're all unique and special, and we're all smart, or we're all, if we're not smart, we're something else. No. Some people are fucking idiots. Some people are ugly. Some people suck at all of the things. I'm one of them. In a lot of ways, I'm terrible at a lot of stuff. People like that, or people like me, are still allowed to have self-worth. We're still allowed to be happy with who we are. We're still allowed to give ourselves some measure of self-love. Just because you're not beautiful doesn't mean you have to constantly just sit there and berate yourself for your own shortcomings. It's a terrible method of looking at it. And then secondly, oh man, I have a lot of stuff I want to say on this. This is going to be disjointed, but bear with me. Another part of it is what I said before. People will go different directions. So they'll say, okay, well, I'm not beautiful. I'm ugly. I'm ugly, but I'm funny, right? And that makes it okay. And that just does the same thing. And it might not even necessarily be true, but it still defines yourself. It still defines the limits of your self-esteem by what, by how good you are at stuff, by how intrinsically valuable you are along some entirely arbitrary axes, right? You're saying, okay, I'm not beautiful, but I am funny. You're still saying I'm not allowed to have self-worth unless I'm funny or unless I'm something. You cannot excel at anything and still have self-worth. And what goes hand in hand with this is the phenomenon of there always being a bigger fish, right? Because this will inevitably, in my mind, this line of thinking of I am this thing and therefore it's okay, I am allowed to have self-worth. Let's keep using the physical attractiveness barometer because I think that's a really easy and relatable one to stick to. But okay, so I am beautiful, right? I'm not beautiful. No, I am beautiful. It's okay. I'm allowed to love myself because of that. This is what that inevitably leads to. You will see somebody else who's more attractive than you. It will happen. And you'll see people who are less attractive than you, probably, right? Because you've set up your own internal value system to conflate with physical attractiveness, you will then view those other people in a certain light. Namely, you will see the person who's less attractive than you, and you'll say they're less valuable as a person than me. They should have lower self-esteem than I do. And you'll see a person who is more physically attractive than you, and it'll in turn hurt your own self-esteem, because you'll say, well, shit, they're more attractive than me. They're better looking. There's no two ways around it. And you'll associate that with them having a greater value as a person. You will always find a bigger fish than yourself. If you take your self-esteem outside of that spectrum, then it doesn't get influenced by those things. If you say, I can be ugly or I can be pretty, and it has no bearing on how much I value myself as a person, then you're not going to look at somebody who's uglier than you and look down on them. And you're not going to look at somebody who's better looking than you and look down on yourself. It becomes an exterior factor. It becomes something that doesn't even weigh into how you feel about yourself and the world around you. And I think that is way, way healthier than trying to score us all against each other, right? Because if you say, I'm beautiful and therefore I'm allowed to have self-worth, you're always going to run into somebody who's better looking, right? And even if you don't, even if you're, let's say you're the single, objectively most attractive person in the entire world, that's just one aspect, right? That's just one thing. So you could be anybody. I don't know who the most attractive person is. You could be the most attractive person in the world, and guess what? A lot of people are going to be smarter than you. A lot of people are going to be more athletic than you. A lot of people are going to be funnier than you. A lot of people are going to be more likable with their friend group. A lot of people are going to have better family situations. Like, I'm just making stuff up here, and I know I'm reusing stuff, but the point is, you can't be first in everything. Inevitably, you are going to compare yourself to others, and if you are operating under a value system where more proficiency in an area means greater self-worth, you will always find yourself coming up short against others. You will always find cause to disparage yourself and your own valuation in your head. Inevitably. No matter how good you are at everything, you're always going to run into people that are better. There's always a bigger fish. And the other and more damage, I mean, that's a very well-known thing. I think most people understand that. The other part of it that I think is honestly potentially more damaging is the flip side, where you will see people who are worse than you in different ways, and you'll look down on them. You'll say, that person's ugly, that person is stupid, that person is lame, right? And you'll, whether you say it to their face or say it to yourself or don't say it at all, but just privately hold this belief, you'll view them as inferior. And that's horribly dehumanizing and not at all accurate. But it's inspired by this system that you hold to be true, where proficiency equals value. So what I'm advocating for, I guess, is the messaging when you have a crisis of self-esteem should not be, I'm ugly, no, I'm pretty, or I'm ugly, no, I'm not, well, I am ugly, but I'm good at these other things. Actually, I want to talk on that really quick. Life's not fair, okay? Life is not fair. The world did not equally dole us with attributes in exact accordance with each other, right? It wasn't like you had 100 freaking skill points and the big man upstairs was like, well, you get, 13 in attractiveness and 14 in physical, ability, and you get, some intellectual stuff, and it all breaks down, but we've all got 100. So I just need to, I don't see myself being as good at all these other things as all these other people, but I need to go find something that I'm good at, because the points have to be somewhere. And then, it all evens out. We're all at 100, right? So I'm not good at these things, but I'm good at these things, so it's all okay. That's not how it works. It's not how it works. It's entirely unfair, but it's just not backed up by looking at the world around you. Some people are going to be smarter, better athletes. Some people are going to be more intelligent. Some people are going to be all of these things at once. It doesn't mean they're a better person than you. It doesn't mean they hold more value than you. Right? To value yourself in that sense is to inevitably lose. Either of these systems of self-esteem that I've talked about inevitably lead down a road to where you find yourself lacking, to where you find yourself detestable in some way. And that raises the question, which I think has an easy answer, but it still bears to be asked. Okay, well, is that a bad thing? If you have two people and one of them's good at everything and one of them's bad at everything, should the person who's good at everything feel good about themselves or better about themselves than the other person? And should the person who's bad at everything feel bad about themselves, right? And I think secretly, many people think that should be true. That if somebody's bad at everything, they should feel bad about themselves because they feel like it will elicit some change. They feel like you need to feel bad about yourself to improve yourself. I don't think that's true at all. And I don't think that somebody who is bad at everything should feel bad about themselves. And I think striving for change and self-improvement should be a constant of your life, regardless of where you feel your place in the world scoring of goodness is. I think you shouldn't seek not to improve if you are the best person in the world at everything, and I don't think you should seek not to improve if you're the worst person in the world at everything. I think constant upward striving is one of the defining characteristics of humanity. It's one of the most fulfilling and self-actualizing things that you can engage in. So I think that's a separate conversation, but the other part of it is, if you take that sort of dynamic, that thought experiment, you have the good person and the bad person. The thought is, okay, well, if somebody's good at everything, they're going to feel good about themselves because they're going to compare themselves to others and find themselves ahead, right? Instead of finding themselves lacking. It's going to lead to positive self-esteem. But in reality, because of what I've talked about, there's always a bigger fish, and even if there's no bigger fish, there's a different fish that's also bigger. The person who's good at everything is still going to hate themselves. We're just going to end up in a world where everybody, completely independent of how proficient they are at anything, is going to find themselves deplorable. So it's not like you're saying, okay, people should conflate their self-worth with their proficiency. I'm making up a person in my head here and then yelling at them, but you're not saying that we should conflate proficiency with self-worth. You're saying everybody should be miserable, really is what the argument is for. And I don't think everybody should be miserable. I think the point, largely, is to enjoy your time here while you have it. And being miserable and self-deprecating the entire time defeats that point handily. So what I'm arguing for is, if you have a crisis of self-esteem and you say, oh no, I'm ugly. Shit, I'm ugly. Brutal self-realization. I've said self 10,000 times. You'll just have to forgive me. What I am advocating for is not to say, no, I'm not ugly, I'm beautiful. Because you might not be. You might be an ugly son of a bitch. Probably are. It's alright. And it's not to say, okay, well, I am ugly, but I'm good at these other things. Because honestly, you might not be. Or if you are, there are people who are better. Either of those leads down a proverbial path of ruin. What I'm advocating for is to say, okay, do I need not to be? Okay, I'm ugly. Do I need to be beautiful? Okay, I'm stupid. Do I need to be smart? Do I need to have all of these things to be happy? I'm arguing that you don't. Take that question, genuinely ask it to yourself, and as honestly as you can, try to answer it. That you Try to really consider the implications here and understand that you don't need to be beautiful. You don't need to be smart. You can just be a guy. You can just be a girl. You can just be somebody trying their best. It's enough. It's enough for you to be happy, which is the point. And that's what I will leave you and myself with until tomorrow. And I'll probably talk about some shit a lot less broadly meaningful. Maybe I'll yell about, like, I don't know, stop signs or something. Keep going with the traffic issues. But that's a tomorrow thing.